Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's show. As always, this is Cult Potato, here to talk about another cult movie. As always, I am your host, and joining me is my good buddy Grady. How's it going?
I'm good. I got no fancy intro that time.
Oh, well, I mean, if you insist. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cult Potato. As always, here to talk about everybody's favorite and least favorite cult movies. I am your ever-faithful host, Campion, and joining me is a man who has told me in confidence on multiple occasions that if anyone in the military just wanted to, fight him for whatever reason, he has no respect for them whatsoever. He reckons he could take you, no matter how many there are, you could come after him in his sleep and he'd be fine. That's what he told me. So if you could come at him with weapons and he'd be fine. Mr. Grady Hooker, the self-proclaimed toughest man in the world. How's it going?
I'm going good. I'm prepped. I got 2 whole muscles. That's all I need. I love never knowing what you're going to throw at me for an intro. By the way, I'm keeping all of that in.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the point. You heard it, folks. He didn't deny it. He thinks he could take anyone. Just go after him.
Yeah, sure.
Message me privately, and I'll send you his address.
All right, don't do that one.
What are we talking about today, Grady?
We're talking about Assassination Nation.
Yes. A film that... Hang on, I'm going to pull this up, because before I'd even watched it, it was like soon after we'd recorded our last episode, I get this message, right, from Grady, just being like, actually, it isn't exactly what I remember before, it might just be a bit more, just throwing it out there, just a bit of warning. Like, hang on, quote from the message right here. Assassination is tongue's getting tied. Assassination Nation is rough. Holy XD. I forgot how rough it is, smiley face. Good luck being able to talk about it without mentioning the 500 things that are dodgy.
I'm not wrong, am I?
It was a lot heavier than I thought it was. By the way, that was in the middle of the day. That was at... Wait, no, that was at... Was that it? It's 12,
was at midnight.
That was at midnight.
Yeah, I watched the movie at like 10, 11 p.m.
I thought, he said it to me at around lunch. It's like, no, I was well in bed at that point. A bleary-eyed Campion wakes up, looks at his phone, and he's like, about that movie I told you to watch.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Well, did you heed my warning?
Well, I heeded it, but I still had to watch it for the show, Grady.
That's true. But you went into it understanding it might be a bit much.
To be fair, the film does warn you well in advance what it's gonna do.
I'm pretty sure it gives you like 20 trigger warnings at the start.
Yes, a very I would call it a bit it's a bit cheeky, bit tongue in cheek. Just like, hey, here's what's here's what's going on in the film.
It does put in things like fragile male ego and stuff like that, toxic masculinity.
That did genuinely make me laugh.
There was some good warnings in there as well, alongside the stuff that I guess is more traditional trigger warnings of what it requires.
Okay, Grady, do you want to... Because we're very bad at just launching straight into the film review without discussing the actual plot first, so I'm just going to throw it to you, Grady. Just give us a basic rundown of what this film entails.
Alrighty. This film is about 4 high school girls who live in a small town, Salem, hilariously enough, and slowly people sort of get their data hacked, all of their photos, all of their text conversations, etc. The first half of the movie is sort of spent around like, what would you do if your stuff got hacked? And then in about the middle of the movie, all hell breaks loose as half the town gets hacked. And then it explodes into a massive witch hunt. It turns into an action movie. Guns are flying. People are being hunted. And really the whole tone of the movie changes in the middle of it.
Yeah. Around about the middle, around about the end is where you just get the full-on bloodbath. I remember one review I looked at described it as like Mean Girls meets The Purge.
Yeah, I would say the first half is pretty Mean Girls and the second half is pretty purgy, so...
Yeah. And in fact, I would say that it's kind of like that episode from the last season of Community, except way more violent.
Yeah, it touches on a similar sort of concepts. Like obviously the concepts of people being hacked and exposed is not like crazy innovative. It's stuff that's been explored before. I just really like the combination, I guess, of that then moving into the Purge.
To be honest, I actually threw that at you because I thought it'd be like, oh, here's a nice easy setup to segue
I'm not doing
into
it.
talking about the cast.
Look, there's like 3 cast members you might know in this film. It's not a hugely well-known cast, but obviously the one that you're touching on is probably the most famous person on the cast, being Joel McHale.
Yeah. A couple others that I'm sort of familiar with. Bill Skarsgard is pretty big nowadays. He of course played. He did a few things. He played like Pennywise and It. I've heard of Abra. I haven't listened to any of her music, but I'm aware that she exists. And yeah, that's about it.
And for me, at least, Bella Thorne.
Bella Thorne, yeah, of course, yeah.
That's pretty much the cast. At least to me, it was Joel, Bill, and Bella. In terms of knowing them going into it, I know a couple more now after them because I've taken a look at the cast. But yeah, there's not a lot to the cast. There's a lot of, I guess, relatively unknown people or people who work with the roles, like musicians or people like that.
Yeah, and I'm somewhat familiar with the director Sam Levinson. I've seen a bit of Euphoria, which is which is a show that he created, which is running on HBO at the moment. Wasn't the biggest fan of it. It's not my cup of tea, although it does sort of touch on similar-ish kind of things, although that's a little bit more grounded and less violent, although probably like way more sexual. Which is saying something.
It really is for this movie. Half of the trigger warnings are for violence and gore, and half of the trigger warnings are for sexual content.
Yes. Although it is. I just gotta say with the cast, I thought the cast was actually pretty good, especially with the core 4. Even though only 2 of them really get to do anything with their characters, but we'll get on that in a minute. But it's just kind of funny just seeing actors who are portraying teenagers who I know for a fact are older than I am.
Yeah.
It's just very weird. Like, I double checked. Like Abra, she's playing like a high school senior. She's in her 30s, and I think Bill Skarsgård. I'm trying to remember who he played. Did he play the leads? Lilies. Did he play her boyfriend?
Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, and I know Bill Skarsgård's way older than I am, so it is very strange. Don't get me wrong; they look the part, but I still know how old these people are. I get why they do this. I get it, okay? It's just strange, isn't it?
Especially with some of the like topics that are being touched on. Yeah. Like, honestly, the movie gave a whole bunch of trigger warnings at the start, and I feel like, as I sent in that message to you, we're not going to be able to get through this episode without touching on a lot of those touchy subjects.
Well, it's as if the entire film is based around that.
Yeah, so I guess this is our official trigger warning point. If you want to jump off, jump off. A lot of dark stuff is probably going to be touched on throughout this episode.
And from the film's trigger warnings, in order, the film depicts bullying, blood, abuse, classism, death, drinking, drug use, sexual content, toxic masculinity, the male gaze, homophobia, transphobia, guns, nationalism, racism, kidnapping, murder, attempted murder, swearing, torture, violence, gore, weapons, and fragile male egos.
It's a lot of warnings.
It's a lot of warnings. To be fair, that's something that I do want to give this film credit for, is that it is a very visually stylish kind of film. I don't have the kind of film vocabulary necessary to properly describe visual elements, but I do love the way that a lot of things are shot and the way it's presented. Music choice, I'm not super into that, to be perfectly honest. I thought it was a bit much, but the film's visuals I really enjoyed. I remember this fantastic shot in the film. It's the sequence where that one girl with the baseball bat is going to bash Bella Thorne's head in. Mm-hmm. Like the scene where she's standing behind the cheerleaders, and then it kind of zooms out from her, but then the whole because she's standing in front of like the American flag, and then the whole shot flips upside down. It was a very cool looking shot.
Yeah, I think that on the rewatch, as you say, the visuals were something that, like, I love this movie for one scene, and I'm sure we'll get to it, but like, there's so many, as you say there, like even the symbolism of the upside down American flag, which is behind her when they do the zoom out and the flip is amazing. Just the colors and shots, you know, when they want to depict the bright happy color versus the sort of more dark stuff, they contrast that really well. And the visuals really stand out on this one for me.
In fact, something more on the something that really stood out to me just on a practical effects kind of thing is when the character Bex, when she's struggling with an assailant underwater with a nail gun, just the way that like you can tell when the guy starts getting shot that like the little puffs of like red blood in the underwater as the nail gun's firing off. It was just, it's difficult to describe, but the way that was done was just looked very. I just appreciate it because that could not have been an easy scene to like set up and shoot. No. So I just thought that was very cool.
Yeah, and
I mean, in terms of actual visual, it's probably not as impressive as some of the other stuff. I just thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's immediately after my favorite scene in the movie as well, which I'm just going to shoot into because this was the movie that I knew going into it, and Campion had no idea. There was one scene that was filmed as one shot. Obviously, it was not, but it was filmed as one shot while people are trying to break into the house with the 4 girls in it. And not only like the way it goes up and down stairs as it follows characters throughout the house, and like you see people hiding behind curtains or trying to break into a window, and then you pan back around and they're like not there, they've moved, and you're trying to like keep track of these people, and it's a solid like 3 to 4 minutes, if not longer, of just this one shot, and then it finally ends where, on a technical level, because I've looked up how they did that, the drone changes into a proper actual cinematography camera as it goes inside. So it like quote unquote goes through glass and it switches camera there and does, I guess, the normal scenes. And that's my favorite scene of the whole movie.
Yeah, it's a very visually kind of impressive. I'm actually seeing that scene talk, like it's mentioned briefly on the Wikipedia article, which you usually don't get, so
I really enjoyed, like, the point of that I went out and to figure out how they shot it. That's how much I enjoyed that one. But I guess before we get too much into the specifics, like you talk about us just launching straight into the film review, I knew what this movie was. You coming into it, what were your impressions?
The word, when you pitch something Assassination Nation and you look at the poster, I thought, oh, it's gonna be like it's probably I expected something along the lines of like Kill Bill. Mm-hmm. Something like that. Something, similar level of violence, but definitely not that kind of topic. I thought it was going to be like, an over-the-top action spectacle kind of thing. Like a Devil May Cry, but in movie form sort of thing. Like a real turn your brain off, watch the stylistic action kind of thing. Maybe in the similar vein to Sucker Punch, but hopefully not as terrible. Something along those lines. But it was not that. It was not that at all. It is, for like 2/3 of the film, it is mostly just like a social satire kind of movie. Like discussing like high school life, social media and how that affects it. I was going to say the political climate in 2018 America, but let's be real, that it's only been 3 years. It's still more or less the same. And here as well, let's be honest. But it's not the kind of film I usually watch, and it's difficult for me to say that I enjoy it because this doesn't seem like a film meant to be enjoyed. It's supposed to be loud, visceral, frenetic, kind of in your face with the message that with what it's trying to say. Nothing really all that subtle or fun about it is kind of what I'm taking away from that.
Yeah, I think it's still okay to enjoy it, but like, I guess the way I'd say that I enjoy it is I enjoy the way they portray their message. Because obviously you can just say a message. This could have been like a well, 10-minute speech to camera uploaded to YouTube on 260p.
That's how the film ends.
That's true. Like, that's how that could have been the whole point from the director or from the screenwriter's perspective, or you can produce this.
By the way, just quick trivia, it was written by the director.
Sweet.
Just so we know.
And, like, yeah, I fully enjoy the experience of watching the film. Does it make me feel uneasy at parts? For sure. And I've seen this film multiple times already, and there's still parts that make me a little icky or a little bit of a shiver down my spine kind of feeling.
Yeah. It's, for me, it's because it's difficult for me to talk about this because it's a film that it has like this really wild and frenetic and really stylistic kind of tone to it, and you know, it's a lot of the action scene. It's paced as like a very, you know, fast-paced and loud action movie towards the end, kinda. But in other parts, it really doesn't seem like a film that wants to be enjoyed. If you catch my meaning,
yeah.
For me, it feels like a film that. Because, like, there are films out there that are built from the ground up not to be enjoyed. It's built to be, you know, interesting or provocative. But you're not supposed to have fun. Like, I don't think anyone's walked away from Requiem for a Dream going, yeah, that was a fun cinematic experience. That was really good, you know. I
wouldn't know, I haven't seen it.
Oh, I would recommend... Have you seen The Wrestler or Black Swan?
No.
Ugh. Well, imagine you have.
Put them on the list.
Okay, all three of those are critically acclaimed, wild, like financially successful films. They're not.
Whoops.
They're not exactly cult classics.
I'll put them on my personal list.
Well, I mean, if you want to feel depressed and awful about yourself, then yes, watch those three movies back to back. Just feel just the worst, just the absolute worst.
But yeah, I get what you're trying to say, I guess, and...
Do you? Because I completely forgot what I was trying to say.
The film has a message, and it's not a happy-go-lucky message. It's not a, here's a fun way of presenting this where we make you think about it, and then you sort of laugh it off as it happens. It just makes you think about it and be sad.
Yeah. And it's... Okay, I'm just going to come out and say it. The film... Because, again, I've seen some of this director's other work. It did come off as fairly pretentious to me in parts. Like, some parts of it really worked for me, like that scene where our main character, Lily, is discussing her artwork with the principal, you know, that discussion about, how come the presentation of the naked female form is automatically pornography, stuff like that. That stuff like that really worked for me. But then there's other parts in the film, like, again, the aforementioned soliloquy Lily gives towards the end of the film.
Yeah.
Was just... It really smacked in the face of someone who really wants to say something, but is either conveying it in a very haphazard kind of way, or he's trying to say more than he actually is how I honestly felt about it. Because, especially with I think a lot of it honestly comes from the dialogue and the way the characters are presented. Because whilst there are a couple of really I don't know, I have no idea if you're agreeing with this, by the way. A lot of the dialogue to me, whilst it did, in some places it worked, like the conversation with the principal, but a lot of it felt like a 40-year-old man trying really, really hard to convey how they think teenagers actually talk.
Okay.
It didn't quite reach the levels of hey there, fellow kids, look at me, I'm one of you. But it did feel like just a bit off. Like it was a bit... Their dialogue felt forced and a bit wooden, I suppose, is what I'm really trying to say. Which really took it out for me whenever we had, like, long scenes of characters talking back and forth. It just... it didn't really click for me.
Yeah, I agree on a couple of those points, like the wanting to say so much, like, they weren't going with just one social issue, for example. Like, if there is a social issue, it was in this film. They put literally everything they could, and just jam-packed it in, and that does sometimes make it super crowded where, we can't have a conversation that's just a conversation. Every conversation between our main girls pretty much was always pushing something. And I guess that's what you're talking about, where it was stilted, because just every conversation had a purpose, and it's not always the same as the one we just came off. Sometimes we're jumping and we're now trying to push a different social issue, like we'll jump from transphobia into sort of the social media witch hunt, and then we'll jump into like racism, and it just needs to pick a lane, I think, a little bit, and maybe cut down on how much it was touching.
Because it's not so much that I don't think they could tackle multiple things at once, it's more that they just tried to tackle just about everything all at the same time, and there's no real, as you said before, there's no real breathing room to just let the characters be characters. Like, it felt like during a lot of the dialogue scenes, it didn't feel like a character, like two people were just having a conversation. It felt like the writer was trying to lecture me, the viewer. And again, like, you can layer both of those on top, like, you can have both of those at the same time. You could discuss, the wider social issues whilst having, a character just be a character. Because, like, the whole scene with the principal and Lily discussing her artwork, that worked because, both characters were able to play off their personalities. They were having an actual discussion. The principal wasn't trying to really push his viewpoint on anything. He was just he was trying to encourage her artwork while just trying to, rein her in for it to be more appropriate for school. It felt like a conversation that two actual living, breathing humans are having, rather than just a writer, trying to push his, not push.
Yeah, I get what you're going with.
Am I coming across? I'm not the most articulate when it comes to these sorts of things, so...
I think something that didn't help that was also the fact that our four main girls were so similar as well, so... like, where it was the principal and Lily, he was sort of presenting that alternate authoritative voice, which was, you're in high school. Like, there's limits to what you can try and push. Whereas when our main characters are having a conversation, it's a lot of just, excuses for the sexist term, I don't know the gender neutral version, but like just a lot of yes men in the room, where one character says like, hey, that's bad, and everybody else is going, yes it is, I agree.
I think just calling them clones or copies of each other, because that's how it feels for a lot of the movie. I think the only character apart from Lily is Bex.
Yeah, Bex got a little bit of character development.
Bex got a little bit. But again, not a lot. I couldn't... Like, what I can tell you about Bex is that she's transgender. She has a lot of problems dealing with that. She's the only other character apart from Lily who actually has a character arc in the film. So, at the very least, she's got that going for her. But again, I can't tell you how she is as a person. There's no personality traits or, like... Or just characteristics about her as a person that I can tell you. I can't tell you about any of the main four, to be perfectly honest. Even Lily, she goes through a character arc, kinda. But she's the main character, she gets the most focus, but she doesn't... I can't tell you what kind of person she is. She's a bit snarky, she likes art, this is kind of how it goes.
Yeah, they kind of, in terms of like who's got arcs, they make it pretty obvious towards the end of the movie when they take Em and Sarah and shove them in a cop car for like 20 minutes and sort of just take them off your screen. Yeah. And then while Lily goes and does her arc with Joel McHale, and Bex goes and does her arc with her love interest. I don't think it was a boyfriend necessarily. And they have their separate arcs, and then eventually it comes all back together, but we do sort of just shove Em and Sarah in a cop car and say we'll come back and deal with them later.
Yeah, and it's... Like, the only reason I can actually remember all of their names, apart from Lily and Bex, is because I have the Wikipedia page open. Like, I could not attach myself to any of these people. I just... Well, Lily and Bex are the only ones who get any focus. They're the only characters... period in the film that I can remember. Cannot tell you anyone else's name. Like, again, the principal. He's the principal. Like, Bella Thorne's character. Well, she's Bella Thorne. She's mean. Yeah, she's mean and kind of horrible. She gets her head bashed in with a baseball bat. That's about it. Joel McHale, he's a pedo. I mean, I don't know what more I could say about these characters.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Everybody sort of lived or died by one trait they had, right? Like
and it was a pretty shallow trait as well.
Like the mayor would come out. He was our sort of focus for a good maybe 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, the hard focus. And his thing was just that, he had this secret life off to the side where he likes to dress up in women's underwear, and where he presents his face to the public as sort of this conservative guy in what I presume is a southern state. And that's his sort of trait. And then he shoots himself in the head, and we then make a comment on internet culture where, like, that was memed and it was like #fail, and everybody's sort of laughing about it on the internet. And then his sort of trait, I guess, washes off to the side, and we instead focus on the principal, and his trait is like the super family man who, I guess, causes some provocative actions by having quote unquote nude photos of his daughter, his 4-year-old daughter, in a bath. Yeah. And then that starts, I guess, a big discussion point around, is that bad? Is that not bad? That sort of propels it through.
That quickly kind of gets brushed to the side as we start, gearing up for the purge section of the film.
We do just sort of churn.
Everyone just puts on masks and just goes completely nuts.
And yeah, so that just sort of churns through these. I guess the easiest way to refer to them is that they're all sort of just one-dimensional characters. Yeah. There's no depth.
Yeah. And I suppose I'm not asking for like every character to be fully fleshed out and like really deep, but at least give me a personality for any of the 4 main leads. Or at the very least, if you're going to have 4 main leads, give them all some decent screen time.
Yeah, I guess the point with those ones is you're sort of talking about separating them out in a way that they're different. And to be fair, my favorite of the 4 main leads is Sarah, and she practically gets 0 airtime unless it's with the others. I don't think she has any solo scenes.
I genuinely didn't. I genuinely didn't cotton on to the fact that Sarah and M were supposed to be sisters until like reading the Wikipedia page. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure they mentioned it in the movie. Didn't retain it. Couldn't retain that information at all. I don't think they act sisterly or they have any scenes as like family throughout the entire film.
I think it's just that one shot with their mother. But other than that, there's no huge sort of focus on it. And that, I guess, comes back down to that one-dimensional, right? When you're trying to put so much into lessons and trying to make you think and make you have discussions and make you think, the characters are obviously going to sacrifice their development time because you just don't have 60 hours of movie.
Yeah. I think that it could have worked a lot better if they just really trimmed it down a lot. Like, if we'd cut down on the cast, if we kind of tightened the focus a bit, even if we, instead of having 4 main characters, even if we just had 2, because, I mean, Lily and Bex were the only 2 that we actually focused on. If we just stuck to them, I think it could have worked a lot better.
Yeah, I do think tightening was required. Like, as much as I enjoy this movie because of the themes. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, man, that character is amazing, they were built so well, they had this awesome character arc. I really do just like the sort of genre crash of the 2 and all the social things that are brought up, because they're things that I think about as well, so having those discussion points there are interesting.
Yeah, it's something that it really did need to be, as we said before, it really did need to be trimmed down in a lot of places. I think that maybe if they'd also gotten to what I'm now referring to the Purge section, just for simplicity's sake, I think that if they'd gotten to that bit, to that section a bit sooner, because that's like the last third of the movie, I think that maybe if they'd bumped it up to like midway, and so because it's more like it starts off kind of slow, and then kind of about a quarter way to the movie, then we start building up to the Purge section. Whereas I feel like if the story that the film itself, if it started later, if it started on the build to the Purge section, which kicks off in the midway point, I think that would have also made it a lot more interesting. Because don't remember, the last third of the film looks really good. Is honestly the best part of the film. Like, I don't think either of us are really arguing on that. The music choice I also wasn't a fan of, but I think that's more of a subjective thing. Like, I really did not like the music for this movie for whatever reason.
It's super subjective. When I was sitting here watching the movie with my girlfriend and we said, hey, we need to look up the soundtrack for this movie so we can listen to it.
Yeah, my response was whenever a new song kicked in, I was just like, oh, please shut up. Please stop. You're just ripping me out of the moment. Just please leave me alone.
Yeah, very different view of the soundtrack on that one. I'm gonna give it a thumbs up.
Yeah, I figured that would be more of a hard subjective kind of thing. Actually, you know what I thought this film was gonna be like when you first said, "Hey, let's watch this," because I thought it would be like kind of like Guns Akimbo. Remember that movie we went to go see? I thought it would be like that because I really like that movie because it kind of seemed it'll be like that kind of movie. It was not.
You were way off.
Way off.
That's comedy action.
Yes, I thought it was going to be like that sort of movie. I like that.
What genres does this put on it? Action. It does put comedy. Interesting.
It has some moments of comedy.
I would not call it a comedy.
There is way too much rape in this movie for it to be called comedy.
Yeah. It's...
there's a lot.
Yeah.
Man. I gotta know, though, because I felt uncomfortable watching it alone. What was it like watching it with another person?
Very similar. Like, obviously I've seen it on my own, and I've now seen it with two people, so I've watched it twice with different people. Yeah. And yeah, it still gets you. Like, you feel double the uncomfortability because you feel your own uncomfortability, and then you also feel the other person's. And so it gets pretty rough in that way of like, you almost want to like pause it or stop it or like have a break. You're like, ooh, a lot of rough stuff back to back, especially as you say, a lot of the rape scenes.
I had to. I was just like, well, I'm just gonna take a quick break.
Yeah, pause that, get up, have a drink.
Yeah.
There is some definite rough scenes where like just back to back stuff, especially as you say when it hits the purge stuff and Lily goes around to John McHale's house. Some of the most uncomfortable scenes in the movie, and then it's just back to back because you got the sort of what I guess you could refer to as like attempted rape portion, which moves straight into like finding a half mutilated dead body in the bathtub.
Sorry, but labeling an entire section of the movie attempted rape, that I don't think you realize quite how funny that sounds to say, just a casual, no-nonsense kind of voice.
We gave the trigger warnings to the start. Okay.
It's just a very blunt way of putting that. It's just like, wow, okay.
I don't remember the ages either of these characters, but I believe it was like 16 for Lily, and like Joel McHale's character was like wife and kids, kind of 30.
well into his 40s.
Yeah, which just cranks up the uncomfortability on that scene. But again, I think that's how you're meant to feel.
Well, great. Yep. Yeah, no shit, Grady. We were supposed to feel uncomfortable in the attempted rape scene. Good. Great observation there.
Look, I don't always have great observations.
But, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. That's definitely what the director wanted you to feel in that scene. I would be concerned if he wanted me to feel anything else.
Look, there's some weird films with some weird directors, man. But I don't think this is one of them.
No.
It's just hard to do those scenes back to back, because we do head from that one straight into like a Bex being hung up scene, I believe.
Yeah, like the lynching scene, it was just... Yeah.
They're rough. Yeah. Like, don't watch this movie if you're looking for an easy watch. It's not a fun one.
It isn't the hardest watch I've had. Again, Requiem for a Dream. But it was still a pretty rough film, and I don't think I would ever watch it with, like, other people. I feel like that would just make it more... It's just like, I think this is an experience I kind of want to have on my own.
Fair. Yeah, it definitely does ramp up every feeling you feel times 2.
Yeah. And to be fair, towards the end, a lot of kind of how the escalation goes, you could point at it and say, I don't think that's really how it would go. Like, let's be honest, like the full-on town-wide riot over, the hacking and stuff like that. I don't think that's it's not realistic. I don't think it's something that's would actually happen. But I don't really think that's what the film was trying to say. I get that because for all the crap I'm giving this film, it did manage to convey that, hey, this is more of like a stylistic metaphor kind of thing. We're not saying that, these kinds of hacks or these things kind of being exposed or these issues being discussed would cause a town to go into a full-on murderous riot. But it's supposed to be like a metaphor for kind of like the online witch hunts and stuff that happens. Or at least that's kind of what I got from it. Like that final shot at the very end, at least I think it's the final shot, the one with the marching band kind of going through the town.
Yeah, it's the credit scene,
walking past all the dead bodies. Like, obviously that's not supposed to be like, that's not something an actual marching band would do. It's just supposed to be, a metaphor that, after all the horrible things are happening, things just keep moving forward and everyone pretends that everything, is all hunky-dory. It's things like that I can kind of give a pass to. I give more crap to the whole characters not feeling realistic, because that's more, I need to connect to these people. I need to, view them as actual human beings. Whereas that kind of stuff, the other more stylistic kind of stuff, I can give a pass to. Like, we talked earlier about the scene with the baseball bat and the cheerleaders.
Mm-hmm.
Again, beautifully shot scene. But she's standing there with a baseball bat looking at them menacingly while the cheerleaders are doing their practice. They clearly know she's there, and normal people would stop and be like, hey, what are you doing? Whereas in the movie, they kind of keep on practicing. Again, that's a pass. It's just supposed to be like a stylistic kind of shot. It's not supposed to be a grounded kind of thing. That I can give a pass to. The characters, not so much. I need something to kind of grasp there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, we talk about the character's lack of depth and the visual piece to it. While I was watching it on the couch with my girlfriend, specifically the scene before the mayor goes out to speak to the people, and he hits his head on the wall, and he's sort of amping himself up to go out, and the camera follows him sort of over the shoulder, kind of POV. She actually pointed out that she felt very connected in that moment to the character. Like, she felt the anxiety that he had going out there, and she felt that pressure and the crowd being against him, and then he shot himself in the head, and it was a little less fun to feel like you were him.
Yeah.
And then it's mirrored again with the principal about 10 minutes later, and she did it again. She was like, I feel like I'm with him, but I know how the last one went. I'm not committing.
Yeah. I think it's more that, for the principal, we'd already had a scene which was able to, it's not the deepest of characters, but it had some, some qualities that you could kind of latch onto, or at least something that you could connect with. And the mayor, he's amping himself up, is clearly nervous. That's something we don't get a lot of that with the character, with the main, with like the core 4 characters. Stuff happens to them and they do things. That more or less sums up their entire experience throughout the film. I can't really describe to you who they are as people. Like, yeah, and I mean, the number one thing, I looked at a few reviews for this, and that was sort of the number one criticism of this film is that the characters are pretty thinly written.
Yeah.
The action looks great, like stylist, like the visuals all look fantastic, but you can't really connect to any of these people.
And I guess the one other complaint, while I have my girlfriend's notes up, was specifically the ending. Obviously, it's how it's meant to make you feel. But like most people could see that it was going to be the brother, and they pull him in and everything. But when they ask him why he did it, and his answer was for the lols.
Oh, that again goes back to the whole 40-year-old man trying to talk like a teenager, dude. We said that we said that ironically as teenagers. Like that was back when we were teenagers a decade ago. Like does anyone even say for the lols anymore? Like I
don't know for sure. I
haven't seen anyone say that even ironically in years. It made me cringe so hard I thought I was gonna get whiplash, dude.
Yeah, I guess her point was more how like underwhelming. Like this whole film, this whole riot, everything happened because some kid did it for the lols.
But even it's the way he worded it. It could have been worded better. Like to be honest, when he just shrugged his shoulders and he said, "I don't know," the film should have cut there. If he shrugged his shoulders and just went, "I don't know," and it's just like, "Yes, okay, cut there, end." And he's like, "I did it for the lols." It's like, "Oh, great, thanks, thanks for that, mate." You just, you're not a big fan of Send 'Em Home Happy, are you?
No.
Because if he had said, "I don't know," and it's like, that's actually why a lot of teenage actors do it. They do it because they think it's funny or because they want attention or something. But if he just said, "I don't know," that would have been an actual, it's just like, oh, all this death and carnage, all this horrible stuff was pointless. He didn't even know why he did it. It's like that actually would have been a good way to send off the film. But nope, you had to add that one extra dialogue. If you had cut that, the ending would have been way better.
Well, for the lols, I'm gonna suggest you start spitting your facts about this movie, and hopefully you've prepped the facts, because I didn't come into it with any of the facts.
It's all good. Yeah, I've got some of it here. Okay, so originally it was made on a budget of $7 million, as with every film that we've covered so far. We really got to cover a financially successful film at some point. It only had a box office of 2.8 million. Really difficult for me to tell, like, home media. This is the thing with a lot of recent stuff. It's difficult to tell how well it's doing on home media because of streaming services and stuff like that. It did, yeah, from what I could tell, it just did pretty poorly in theaters. It only got 4 million on its opening weekend, and it didn't go up anywhere just from that. First opening week, it finished 15th at the box office, so didn't do very well.
No, the reason I heard it was because it was on somebody's Reddit thread of like films from 2018 that you might have missed.
Yeah, it did make a cut. It did do this because it did the film festival circuits, and it actually got a few. It was nominated and it won a few awards from those. So, all in all, it's okay. Out of the films we've covered thus far, this is probably the hardest to call a cult classic because I genuinely don't know what the film's cult following looks like, especially since it only came out 3 years ago. But yeah, the term cult film is really subjective and all over the place and difficult to pin down, and it's our show, so yeah. We'll okay, maybe don't say that. Cut that part out.
Not cutting that part.
God damn it, Grady. Is this revenge for me saying that people in the military should just beat you up?
Yep. I get to keep into the edit whatever I want.
God damn it.
But no, this was kind of... I put this film in here, like... It was, as you say, 3 years old, but I feel like it was... Even for 3 years ago, it didn't hit as hard as it now hits in 2021, and I'm seeing it come up a lot more and stuff.
It's great, because I read some of the stuff about it. It's like, oh yeah, this film is... from the directors, like, this film was supposed to be like a response to... the dumpster fire that was 2018, and I'm just like, oh boy, oh sweet child, if you only knew. Oh, I wish things were like 2018. It'd be so much better. Oh man. But yeah, the whole point of the show is to cover films that, we might have missed. Some of them a bit more obscure, some of them not, but it's to cover just interesting films. Films that are a bit off the beaten path, a bit interesting to talk about. It maybe didn't get the attention that it warrants. And even though I honestly didn't like this film, I still thought it was an interesting experience, and I'm glad that I watched it.
That's all I ask. That's the tick in the box for a Grady suggestion.
Yeah, and at the very least, where at the very least it tries to discuss important issues, even if I don't think that it really hits those. Okay, we didn't even talk about how its actual messaging. You know what? It tries. It's a bit all over the place, and it could have used a couple more rewrites and some trimming down. But it does a decent job, and at least visually it was really cool. Mm-hmm. So that's my long-winded final thoughts on it. Grady, what are your final thoughts? And please be a bit more succinct than I am.
It's visually amazing. I love so many shots in here. Cinematography, 10 out of 10. Writing, a little less so. But it touches on a bunch of stuff I don't see other movies touching on, so take that as a challenge.
I give the writing a 5 or a 6. It wasn't terrible. I've seen films with terrible scripts. It just needed a bit more work to get it to a much better place.
Yeah. And I guess we talked about the definition of cult classic, some films being like this one.
Hang on, someone started a lawnmower outside. I'm gonna go shut my door.
I'm keeping that in. We talk about the definition of a cult classic, and this movie sort of riding that line, and I brought us into a sort of newer film. We're about to be thrown all the way back to the 80s again for our next one.
Yes, because when we return next time, we will be covering an absolute classic. I don't think either of us have really seen it, but it's a film that I'm really looking forward to seeing. I've heard a lot of good stuff about it. The film we will be covering next time is The Princess Bride. I'm looking forward to it, Grady. How about you?
Yeah, something I've never seen. I've seen small clips of like Andre the Giant's parts in it, but other than that, going into it pretty blind.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. But that brings our show to an end. Thank you, Grady, for joining us today. Thank you, Grady, for doing another episode with me today and for just suggesting that film. Any final thoughts? And anything at all. Doesn't even have to be movie related. Just something. Just something.
I'm a potato.
Insightful as always. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We have been the Lexicon of Lore. Thank you for listening to Cult Potato, and we hope to see you all next time.